Danae here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be showing you my favorite books of all time. Now, this is a video that I've thought about doing for a hot minute now, and the reason that I put it off so long is because this year specifically, my reading tastes are expanding. I have been buying a lot of books I usually wouldn't buy. I have been branching out into genres I never really read, and I have just been changing as an individual. So I always felt like this list that I have now might not be true to who I am a year from now. And that's when I thought that it could actually just be fun to film it now, and then maybe a year in the future look back on it and see if it's the same, if it's changed, if it's very different. So I think this will just be a fun video to have just to see how it changes over time. So this is a list of my favorite books of all time as of May 1st. It's gonna be May. So I'm gonna mark it there. At this point in my life, these are my favorite books. I have 9 books to talk about. I am very particular about what books I add to my favorites shelf. Not every book that I give 5 stars is going to end up on the shelf. These are books that have impacted me, books that I always go back to, books that I would reread in a heartbeat. So without further ado, I'm just going to get into this list, and I'm actually going to start with my favorite book of all time. My favorite book of all time is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And I think the reason that I love this book as much as I do is because I read this at a very vulnerable point in my life, and this was exactly what I needed to read at that point in time. You know what I mean? I feel like when you read a book can definitely impact how strongly you feel about it. If I had read this book years ago, I might not have loved it as much as I do now. But reading it at age 25 and at that point in my life when I was questioning a lot of things and just wondering where I wanted to go, this book just helped me a lot. There's a lot of really amazing passages about life and growth, and I know a lot of people say that Addie is a boring character and that there's not a lot of growth with her, but I personally don't agree. If you don't know what The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is, this book follows a girl who makes a deal with the devil to get out of an arranged marriage. She just wants to be free, to make her own choices and live her life how she wants to. So she makes that deal, and it comes at a cost that she is free of this marriage, but the cost of her being free is that she lives forever and nobody remembers who she is. So essentially, she could be having a conversation with someone, she steps out of the room to use the bathroom, she comes back, they don't know who she is. It is an incredibly lonely life. And she is immortal, so she has to live with that for centuries, decades. And this book is more character-driven than plot-driven. I see a lot of critique that this is a more boring book with no plot, and honestly, I feel like if you go into it knowing that it is more character-driven, you'll probably enjoy it more if you lower those expectations a little bit. I feel like this book, there's a lot of expectations with it, and when you read it and you don't get those expectations, people are severely disappointed. So I would just go into this without any expectations. Just go into it knowing that you might learn a little bit about yourself while reading it. I cried a lot reading this book. I literally had like a whole mental breakdown reading this book because I just felt very seen. And honestly, that is enough for me, even if there isn't as much plot in here. The relatability factor is there, and it's very touching, and I genuinely would recommend this to everybody. I genuinely would. Do I think everyone will love it as much as me? No, but I really want everyone to give it a shot. And I'm sorry if you end up not liking it, but I love it. Moving on, the rest of these books are not going to be in any particular order. This is not going to be ranked in terms of a list of my top favorite books. The rest are literally just in my favorite shelf in no particular order. So I'm going to start with The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. We knew this was coming. This is the rom-com of my dreams. This is one of the first books that I read when I started getting into the romance genre, and I'm really glad I did because this book was just everything. I love the banter in here between the two main characters. I love their relationship. I love the story. I love the concept. I love the writing of it. I love everything about this book. It had me laughing out loud. It had me wanting to stop everything I was doing to continue reading, and I love when I find a book like that where I literally feel like I cannot put it down. This book follows our two main characters whose siblings actually are getting married, and they are at the wedding, and everyone at the wedding comes down with this weird food poisoning, including the bride and groom. And two people who miraculously didn't get it were our two main characters in this book, who actually hate each other. But Olive, the main female protagonist in here, her sister, the bride, doesn't want to give up her honeymoon because she won it. It was like a raffle or sweepstakes or something, and she didn't want to give that up. So she agrees to go, but she is disappointed because Ethan, the groom's brother and the man that she hates, ends up going with her. So they end up pretending to be the newlyweds, even though they hate each other and they're not the newlyweds. So it is a little bit of fake dating. It's a little bit of enemies to lovers, and it is just all the tropes that I love in here. And it was just so funny, and watching their relationship grow from them hating each other to them, you know, starting to be cool with each other to them falling in love with each other. It is so beautiful. I love the banter, and I've mentioned this before. Now, because of this book, I will get a Mai Tai every time I see it on the menu. Every time. And every time I think of Olive and Ethan, and I just think that when a book has that big of an impact on you, that you literally start thinking about the characters when you're out to dinner one night, I think that says something. Next up, on a similar note to the Unhoneymooners, we also have The People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This is another one you should have known was coming. This is another really good rom-com, and it's also another one that has a very summery feel. Obviously, it follows our two main characters on vacation. This one is actually more friends to lovers, or I would say friends to strangers to back to friends to lovers type of vibe. It follows our two main characters, Poppy and Alex, and they were best friends, and they would plan a summer trip every single summer. They would go together, and then eventually over the years something happens where they stop talking. They have a falling out, and this goes back and forth between the present summer, where Poppy is trying to plan a trip with Alex to kind of rekindle that friendship, and then it also goes back to summers all the way from like 12 years ago, all of their summer trips over their friendship as they've grown. So you can see how their friendship grew and eventually how it fell apart. And it ties really well into the current day timeline of when they're on their current trip. So it definitely jumps around a lot, but it's really easy to follow. It's a really beautiful story, and I've said this before when talking about this book. Outside of the relationship between Poppy and Alex, I really love the underlying message of this book, just about vacation. They even say at some point in this book that it's really not about the destination that you're going to or what you're doing on your vacation. Honestly, the people you meet on vacation can really make your vacation better. And honestly, I think back to all of the vacations that I've had, and there are several vacations where I can think of people that I've met that even if I might forget their names in the future, I still remember meeting them. I remember where and what we talked about, and it's just a nice story, and I absolutely loved that. It made me feel nostalgic to my previous vacations, and as I was going down the line of their vacations over time, I was also kind of reliving mine, and I love that. It's a very nostalgic book for me, and it's a perfect summer read, and I love their relationship. I think this is a really well done book, and Emily Henry is a queen. Then we have Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book is amazing. Taylor Jenkins Reid is my favorite author of all time. Out of all the books that I've read by her so far, I've read 5 or 6. This is by far my favorite one. I did not expect to like this one as much as I did. It follows a rock group in the 70s, I believe, if I remember correctly. How they formed, how they performed together, and eventually how they broke up. And I just was so fascinated by these characters. This was actually the first audiobook that I ever listened to, and it was the best one to start with. Honestly, if you haven't listened to this on audiobook, or if you're not used to audiobooks, this is a great one to do because it's a full cast, and it makes it amazing because Daisy Jones and the Six is told in interview format. So listening to that as a full cast audiobook is literally like listening to an interview documentary. It's so fascinating, and it's really fun to listen to, and the stories in here are amazing. It's so much more than a rock band. It's the growth of these characters, and it also touches on some other things like female empowerment. There are some really strong women in this book. There's also touches of addiction, and I really like how Taylor Jenkins Reid focuses on addiction because obviously a rock band, like, addiction can be very glamorized in that type of world. The thing that Taylor Jenkins Reid does so beautifully is she takes that in a world where it's glamorous and makes it very not glamorous. She shows the negative things to it, the repercussions of it, the pain that it causes not only the addict but the people around them. And it's very raw, and it's very beautiful how she does it. And there's a couple characters in here that struggle with different substance abuses, and seeing their stories and their growth throughout the book was beautiful. And there are some unlikable characters in here. Specifically, I hear mostly Daisy. But I like Daisy, and I like unlikable characters because there's a lot of growth and purpose to those characters where even if you don't necessarily find them likable, I love reading about them. And this book will stay with me for a very long time. I actually kind of want to reread it very soon, and it's being adapted to a TV show. So I'm super excited. I believe it's going on Amazon, and I am beyond stoked for that. Then we have From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. Mariana Zapata is an author that has been creeping up on me. I love, also, can we acknowledge this is the first book I ever tabbed, and look how awful that is. I really need to go back and retab this. Why did I think it was okay to stick them out so far? So this book is a slow burn romance. It is a sports romance. They are ice skaters. It essentially follows our two main characters who end up having to pair together in a pair skating competition. And it's not only is it enemies to lovers, but it's also grumpy. Both of our characters are grumps. And they hate each other in the beginning. Just being in each other's presence causes a fight. And you might think that that's toxic, but honestly, the tension was so amazing. Mariana Zapata writes slow burn like nobody else. And the payoff at the end, I screamed. And that's what I love. It's like when you're rooting for a couple so much that when it finally happens, it's so rewarding. It's like a reward. I loved it so much. It is a chunker. Oh my god, I can't get over my awful tabs. Next up, we have a book that is probably the oldest on this list. This is a book that touched me when I was in high school, and that is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. This book was everything to me when I first read it. It made me feel so seen in school. It is a shorter read, and it follows our main character, Charlie, and the letters that he wrote to a friend. It's just titled Dear Friend, about his experience in school. And honestly, I feel like at this point most people know what The Perks of Being a Wallflower is. But this is just a book that I always think about, even to this day, even though it's been years since I've read it. But it's just so touching and such a beautiful story. And every time I think of coming of age, this is the standard that I put it to. This is the best coming of age story I have ever read. And no matter how old I get, I feel like this is one that will always be in a favorites list of mine. Because it doesn't matter how old you get. Honestly, like, if it had an impact on me at some point in life, that's special enough to keep it, you know? Then we have Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This book was everything I wanted it to be and more. This is the perfect escapism book. It's incredibly whimsical. It is beautiful storytelling. The writing is almost poetic, and it literally just feels like a dream when you're reading it. Like, I literally felt dreamlike. But it follows our main character, Laszlo Strange, who is obsessed with the city of Weep. And he works in this library, and one day he gets the opportunity to go to the lost city of Weep. People don't remember Weep, and they don't talk about it, so he goes and tries to find answers about what happened to the city. And it is just stunning. I don't even want to say too much, because it's just so good going into it not knowing anything, and just getting this beautifully laid out story. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there is quite a bit of info dump, but with a story like this, it's just beautiful. Even the world building and the info dumping is just beautiful to read about. And I love it so much. I love it so much. And then we have my favorite fantasy of all time, The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Honestly, my love for this book is unmatched. When I think of fantasy, this is the gold standard. This is just so good. I know not everyone is going to agree with me, and that's fine. This is my list, my opinions, and my genuine love for this book. This is a fae book as well, but the relationship between Jude and Cardan, it's quite literally knife to the throat, enemies to lovers. If that is what you like, that is what this is. And honestly, some people are like, oh, it's so toxic. And I'm like, you know, I understand. I get it. But I love it. The relationship between the two, how it grows, absolutely stunning. Holly Black literally leaves you on your toes with this. How she ends the books leading into the next in the series, there's 3 in the series, literally chokehold. She had me in a chokehold with this series. It's super whimsical. Again, like Strange to Dreamer, I think it's very whimsical writing, and it just is so captivating. It's a great escape, and I think that's what I really like in fantasy. I love pretty writing, whimsical storytelling, and yeah, I love it. And I love the romance between Jude and Cardan. It is everything. And honestly, this is a fae story, and you would think that, you know, the fae story is quite overdone at this point, but this is still unlike any fantasy I've ever read. There are parts of this book where I can definitely compare to others, but overall as a whole, it's in a league of its own. Truly, I genuinely think that. And then lastly on this list is a book that I unfortunately don't own yet, and it is the most recent addition to this list. I just listened to it on audiobook a few months ago, and that is The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkoff. This is the only thriller that I've ever given 5 stars. I've read a lot of thrillers. I'm very peculiar and picky with what I rate thrillers. I tend to nitpick a lot. But this, in my opinion, was perfect. I love this so much. I talked about it in a recent vlog, so I probably won't go as in depth with it, but it is a multiple point of view thriller. So you have the time period where it's telling a story from back in the day of this town when a murder happened, to current day when there's this woman who is trying to write a book, and she ends up going to this cabin, and it's in this big snowstorm, and she finds a boy out in the snow. And then you have another time period or point of view where you don't actually know when it's happening, who it's happening to, or even where it is. It follows this woman and little girl who you can only assume are held captive somewhere. And somehow they're all going to tie together, and how it happens and how the story is told is so good. It's a very dark and gripping book. It definitely had me at the edge of my seat. It was incredibly creepy at points without trying too hard. And I think that's why I love this book so much, is there's no over-the-top antics. There's no stretch of a plot twist. Honestly, I kind of predicted what was going to happen. There wasn't anything that was incredibly shocking to me. And all that being said, I still loved it and was so engaged in the story, even though I could kind of see where it was going. I don't think that was a fault in the book though, because of how it was written. Like I said, I don't think it was trying to do too much, and therefore it did just enough, and I loved it. So those are all of my current favorite books of all time. Like I said, timestamp it May 1st, 2022. And I am really intrigued to see how I feel a year from now, 2 years from now, or see the changes. But this was actually really fun to just gush about all of my favorite books, and now you guys know if you had any questions about what my favorite books were. So I'm going to wrap this up here. I hope you liked this video. If you did, don't forget to hit the thumbs up down below to help support this channel, and also subscribe to follow me on my reading journey if you haven't already. Like always, all of my socials will be down below. Follow me on my Instagram, my TikTok, my Twitter, my Goodreads. I'm pretty active everywhere at the moment. I am trying to be more active, I should say. And yeah, I hope you like this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.